Okay. Chapter number 6, the security features. Windows has had, for the longest time, the local security policy, which is accessible generally through the administrative tools as a MMC. On a system, which is important if you need to keep a trail on who accessed what when. Here's the user rights assignment. So for example, the administrator is the only one who can create a page file. There are a couple of users, like local service and admin, who can change the time zone. There's a couple of users who can change the system time. Some little things that you may not think about, but you can restrict who can do what on a system. So yeah, who can log on locally, who can back up files, who can load and unload device drivers, so on and so forth. You have quite the list of actions that a user can or cannot take. AppLocker is kind of the same thing, but for applications, which applications are allowed and not allowed on a system. The last bullet point on this slide is important. You want to first audit, you want to first see what programs are being used before you start bringing down the hammer and saying what can and cannot run. This is the AppLocker properties. You can enforce the rules as needed. Like I said, start with auditing before you start enforcing. And you can prevent or allow things like executables, installers, scripts, any packaged applications or dynamic link libraries. AppLocker is sitting towards the bottom of the security policies under application control policies. You'll see AppLocker there, and that's where you can add the rules. Rule permissions say what can run or not run. And you can define that either by a file hash specifically. So this specific file can run as long as it has this hash, or any files in this folder, or any files that were made by a certain publisher. We can be pretty granular in what we allow and not allow. There's the path. We can make exceptions as well, just in case maybe we're testing something or we're testing an update. The software restriction policy is the older version of AppLocker, if you will. Ideally, your system should all be within the same range, so you don't want to run the two together. You'd rather just run AppLocker. You can configure the firewall here, and in the group policy version, you would apply a firewall rule that would take effect on all systems. Here's other things like the password policy. That's where it's at. That's what it looks like. You can do tasks like analyze and configure and export your security configuration and analysis. Auditing is definitely important, especially when you're working on a new system or you're setting up something. You want to know what's happening before you start applying rules. Definitely use your audit logs to see what's happening before you start creating rules to apply. And then later, once you apply a rule, you can go back and re-audit to see what you wanted to happen is happening. Another fancy way of just saying monitoring. So for example, in the event viewer, under computer management, you can see the audit log under security and see when something succeeded, when something failed, who did it, when, where, how. User account control, which came into existence in Windows 8, and we all hated it because it kept asking every single moment for every single action, do you want to do this? And then it got reduced later. It is what you see. It's that annoying thing that really took effect in Windows 8 and has been around since. You can disable it, but it's gotten better in Windows 10, so you don't necessarily want to disable it. It's a good thing that it comes up. An application manifest basically describes the structure of an application along with all the DLL files, the dynamic link library files that are required to run. This may mean that if a program needs certain rights and it's a legitimate program, we can grant it those rights without having to ask us every single time to run. You have these main 4 options when configuring the UAC to always notify you when an app tries to make a change, try to make a change without dimming the desktop, or never. Here's more detailed configuration options that you have available to you. When it comes to malware protection, it kind of seems like Microsoft should be the one on it, but they created that gap that tons of other companies have come in since, and they came back with Windows Defender, which kind of works and does the job. A quick security note. We are at the point where malware is the only term we really use, because a lot of malware has a number of features or characteristics from other tools. So for example, a malicious program that is that acts as spyware could also be a Trojan horse, could also be a backdoor. They're no longer their own separate category. So when you see terms like this, don't think that there is just a family of spyware. A lot of malware take characteristics from many and put them together. With that knowledge, a spyware is anything that only silently watches what you're doing and relays that information out. A virus can spread to other systems, but normally has to be started by the user. Windows Defender does have some real-time scanning and on-demand scanning to kind of see some of these actions and stop them as it recognizes them, just like any other antivirus. And just like any other antivirus, it has to update in order to know what new things are coming. You can configure when to do scans or how to do scans or what folders to exclude when it scans, just like you would in any other antivirus that exists. One of the differences, you can configure Windows Defender in group policy, so you can change the settings to multiple users across your infrastructure from the domain controller, not having to touch every single system. As we mentioned earlier, NTFS does have some permissions that you could use, like EFS. And then a quick little note on encryption, that you have the three main types: symmetric, asymmetric, and hashing when it comes to encrypting. Symmetric basically means the two sides have the same key, kind of like your front door. And if you have roommates or family, everybody has a copy of the exact same key. That is a symmetric encryption. Asymmetric means two people have different keys in order to lock and unlock, kind of like a mailbox, where anybody can drop something in, but only the person with a key can open it to see the contents. Hashing is what's used to store passwords. It's a one-way encryption, which means you can't reverse it. You can only encrypt. Once something is hashed, then, like a password, then the only way to figure out what it is by creating a dictionary, which those exist. Like I said, encrypting file system has been around since 2000, Windows 2000. And it works by using the user account, the user account identification number, in order to secure the files, to create a key to secure the file. So that's why you don't want to delete a user, you want to disable users. Windows 10 can generate a digital certificate in order to do it. You can also use a command line utility called Cipher to do the same. And it will encrypt the file, or the files, or the folder, whatever the case may be. But just remember that you really want to disable accounts when a user leaves, so that you can access the data afterwards, which is exactly what I was talking about here. If that user is lost for whatever reason, we're going to have a problem. You can create recovery certificates just in case it's lost. And you can deploy a recovery certificate in a domain-based environment through the group policy rather than each individual user, which will be necessary in this kind of setup. It is possible to share encrypted files across the network as long as they have the certificates. Easier to do if it's a domain. Then you don't have you don't have to be the one controlling who has access to what key. As long as you're doing it through a domain base, it'll make life easier. If you are able to access the file, if you're the user who encrypted the file and you copy it into a partition that isn't NTFS, all the encryption will go away because, for example, something like FAT doesn't know what to do with it. So Windows will automatically unencrypt it into a FAT partition and show the unencrypted data. If you are trying to copy files that you don't have access to, it'll give you a access denied error. BitLocker has been around for a number of years as a way to encrypt the entire volume instead of just one file or a folder. It can work with a trusted platform module, which is a chip on the motherboard to cryptographically encrypt and encrypt data securely. You can turn it on and it will encrypt the entire drive, not just a little bit. Just like Linux or Mac, where in order to log in or in order to start up the system, you'll have to type in a password to open up the hard drive in order to boot from it. BitLocker can do the exact same thing. So it'll have an unencrypted system partition, and that's the one that only needs what it needs in order to start the operation, and then the encrypted partition that has everything else. You can have master keys and full volume encryption keys. This is good to change, to have different ways to unencrypt if one doesn't work. It's basically a diagram of the last few slides. You have the volume master key encrypted by another key. So if somebody malicious is trying to get a copy of our drive, they can't just figure out what our password is. They're going to have to do some more digging in order to figure it out. So that means our data is safer. And if, let's say it's a laptop and it gets stolen, it's better that they wipe it, because that means our data will stay safe because they were never able to get the keys in order to decrypt the data. You can use the network to unlock a BitLocker system. Of course, it is possible if it's UEFI and you have things like Windows deployment enabled. Then you can retrieve data that has been encrypted by BitLocker and is unable to get accessed. You can also disable it if you're no longer using it or it's no longer necessary. And you can apply it to like a USB drive. So you can take that USB drive encrypted with BitLocker and go around to another Windows system to unlock it. As long as that system has BitLocker as well, you'll be able to decrypt, read the data, lock it up again, and go on from one system to another. Windows Update can no longer be stopped. I think the maximum time that it'll let you wait is a few days, and then it will install updates, which are important to install. You ideally want to install things that are critical or important right away. It used to be through like service patches. Now they use branches instead to upgrade from one build to another. you have the four main branches, the Windows Insider, who gets to see everything first, the current branch for business, and the long term. Most users are on the current branch, whereas some companies can be on the current branch for business or the long term. Like I said, you can change when updates can be installed, but now they're just set to install at some point. The updates will get in place. And here's a view of the advanced options in Windows Update. For business, you can set up your own Windows Update server. So as long as the systems either can connect to your WSUS or are in the same network, they'll be updated through that instead of going to Microsoft.com to get those updates. Great if you want to control what updates make it into your network so they don't break things. Anything that's installed through the Windows Store can't necessarily be handled by Windows Update. You'll have to use the store to do that. And you can do that automatically as well. Cool. Like I said, for this week, we have a set of questions to answer, another assignment, which is from NetLab, and another quiz.